This is update for July 12, 2022, day 139 of the war and of the date update. As always, we're gonna do the sort of general strategic discussion, and then we're gonna walk through the front line. For those who are impatient and just want to know what's going on the front lines, it's essentially, quiet, nothing really major in terms of, fighting. It's all kind of on pause in many ways. So now let's actually move to strategic questions. We will start with the scandal that's been going on, that's actually growing in size in Ukraine and apparently in the US, initiated by Victoria Sparts. So now the sort of next sort of turn of it is Victoria Sparts filed open letter asking for resignation of Andriy Yermak. At the same time, he has been supported by the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in the US. So as a result, Victoria made the sort of a personal attack, I would say, is that she said that I hope Jake Sullivan handles Kyiv better than Kabul, which obviously referring to the very disorderly withdrawal from Afghanistan last year. At the same time, Victoria sort of comments and her approach is actually gathering popular support in Ukraine. And as our take, there is some basis to what she's saying. It's unclear what's sort of the big picture, what's her sort of strategic goal in what she's doing, but there is definitely basis for what she's mentioning, and that sort of resonates with a lot of people in Ukraine, and especially those who are in the armed forces. Now let's switch to a little bit different topic in terms of sort of Russian view on how things are gonna sort of progress in the future. Again, this is obviously very speculative, but we just want to share sort of the vision as how, or at least how Russian side is perceiving this the future of this war. So the view is that Russia will continue fighting to capture the remaining part of the Donetsk region, which is this, as you can see, where the key towns are Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. So that's sort of what they call second phase, to finish the second phase of the operation, or this war. And so then they hope for some for negotiations. And then they expect the negotiations probably will fail through, because the Russian what the Russian side want is basically agree to status quo. Whatever the Russian side captured remains under Russian control, and the rest of Ukraine sort of can kind of like exist the way it is. So that's obviously going to be unacceptable for Ukrainian side. Russian side knows that, and so then they expect the third phase of the war, where the Russian army, Russian forces will try to capture as much of Ukrainian territory as possible. The goal is to literally, as they say, is to get as far to the west as possible, and if it's possible to get to the Polish border, then it's even better. And then after that, the view is we're going to have a new Iron Curtain for decades. And in terms of the timing of all of this, the expectation from the Russian side that it's going to be it's going to be quiet for the remainder of July, and the major Russian offensive will be initiated sometime in August. At the same time, they also expect major Ukrainian offensive in August, towards the end of the August. So it might be two sort of not meeting engagement, but because Russian offensive is probably going to be focused around this Donetsk remaining the Donetsk region in Ukrainian control versus Ukrainian offensive, as was declared by Ukrainian president and the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, is that it's going to be somewhere in the south, and most logical assume it's going to be Kherson or Zaporizhia regions. So they may be happening in different locations. so as this is in terms of timing. At the same time, there is also kind of like internal preparation of Russian population, and there is there are some various government high-ranking Russian government officials. They are openly saying to population that the life that people used to for over the past 20 years will not return in any foreseeable future. So it's very clear that Russia is preparing for the long-term war, and this is going to be war of attrition. And this goes back to our take on this, that Ukraine is not efficient and is not fighting this war from that perspective, because right now it's super inefficient and it's extremely wasting resources, and specifically human resources that it doesn't have, because in the end Ukraine probably can still hope for support in terms of heavy equipment, but in terms of human resources they are irreplaceable, and that's something that Ukrainian Ministry of Defense should value the most. At the same time, that's not what's being valued the most. Equipment is more important than people, and that's in our view. If it doesn't change, it may lead to defeat eventually. Actually, another interesting point in terms of how much ammunition is being spent during this war is that there was some calculation saying that annual production of ammunition in the US is being expanded during every 2 weeks of this war, and that so basically what this says is that the Ukraine is really heavy relying on not even like sort of current production, but really on the stockpiles of ammunition, which apparently US has really large stockpiles of ammunition. So that's the only sort of opportunity for Ukraine in the meanwhile, because stockpiles of artillery ammunition are pretty much exhausted throughout Europe. And another data point that's relevant, so that in terms of UK stockpile of ammunition, that would be enough for 8 days of the war that's been going right now as the way it is, basically, meaning that there is high expenditure of artillery ammunition. So, and then in terms of there are some rumors in terms of Russian sort of stockpiles. Based on our information, they are sort of limitless pit, but there are actually Russian resources starting to saying that apparently Russia has enough ammunition till at least New Year at the current pace, maybe till January and February of the next year. So apparently those those bottomless pits are not totally bottomless, which is obviously true. Plus the current Ukrainian rocket strikes with the help of HIMARS rockets really help to bring that moment much sooner, because there were few more ammunition depots hit over past day. One is the really large one in Luhansk. Here, this is the capital of the Luhansk region. There were some more sort of in the rear here in the Donetsk region, but basically there is significant damage being done to Russian artillery stockpiles. Less so fuel, and the fuel is really much easier for Russian side to sort of bring and so on. But anyways, this rocket war continues. So far, HIMARS are making difference on the not literally battlefield, but in the rear of the Russian army, and really significantly impairing Russian's army ability to continue so sort of continue to perform the way it used to. And this is for now is kind of like okay for Russian army because it's on the pause, and for them right now the most critical is to replenish sort of human resources. That's where what's they missing, as we mentioned, they are smaller in size, and to continue offensive they really need to beef up the number of boots on the ground, and quite significantly. So the artillery shells are not the most sort of like biggest concern for them, but right now it really deprives them of ability of any major ability to wage any major offensive in the immediate term. It actually, there are also reports and anecdotal reports from Russia where regular men being called to their conscription centers, and they basically the employees of those centers, or whatever you call them, the officers of those centers, trying to convince those called there to sign the contract. So basically, there is no mass mobilization, but there is sort of, call it like, well, I don't know if it's called, you can call it stealth mobilization, but there is sort of there's basically Russian army is getting to the point where they really need human resources, and they're trying to get them by trying to convince people to join in sort of a little bit more forceful way. At the same time, Russian officials declaring that mobilization is not on the table for now. The key word here is for now. Eventually, it will become clear that it's needed, simply because Ukraine now has this, HIMARS systems, which are making quite a big difference, and that really means that Russia and Russian side cannot sort of, balance that with anything else, because Russian army does not have precision rockets for their equivalent of HIMARS system, which is Uragan, and there is Smerch, and Ukraine has them too, by the way. So it's all from the Soviet time, but as we discussed many times, it's all designed for saturation, not for precision hits, and that's where the problem is with all of that. So that's just what's going on in Russia. There is a little bit about sort of Russian economy. So, for example, very interesting fact that the TV ads market in Russia. So, the typical amount of the advertising on Russian TV is usually 3 hours 15 minutes, and it's maxed by the government regulation at 3 hours 36 minutes per 24-hour period. So now it drops from 3:15 to 2 hours and 16 minutes. So as you can see, there about a third of their TV advertising market is dead and gone. Then in other news, Russian banks are joining Chinese system, sort of money wiring system, which is called Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, CIPS for short. So what this really means is that it's probably kind of like a crutch or proxy for Russian banks to get to the SWIFT payment system. Basically, what will happen is that Russian banks are now be electronically connected to Chinese banks through this CIPS system, and then they're gonna use Chinese banks as sort of proxy to make payments through the SWIFT system for all whatever international payments they need to make. So essentially, this is another, let's say, failed policy, which probably was necessary, but at the same time, it simply doesn't work. So Russia figured out ways to evade this sanction on its banking system by effectively using Chinese banking system as sort of proxy to make the payments. And another news, Ukraine got more Crab self-propelled howitzers from Poland. So the Ukraine got at least 10 more, probably more than that. So what this really means is that Ukrainian artillery in that sort of segment of the long range 155 millimeter caliber is clearly stronger than the Russian one. There are fewer units in total, but there is clear advantage start to develop on the Ukrainian side in the long range artillery and specifically precision. So what this really means, if it's used properly, it can start to make a difference. Because just to recap, Ukraine has about 18. Well, Ukraine has 12 Panzerhaubitze 2000 or PH 2000. It will get 6 more, so it will have 18 of those. Ukraine already has 18 Crabs. Now it has at least 10 more, and then Ukraine has 18 Caesar self-propelled howitzers from France. So in total, this is actually turning into formidable force that can be used effectively to destroy Russian artillery, at least at the small section of the front line, which is what Russian command was doing. Basically, they're concentrating a lot of artillery on a small stretch of the front line, and then they're just using them to just basically turn everything into the moon landscape. So now Ukraine has not only HIMARS system, but it has enough of this just simple artillery systems to break the Russian artillery system. Whether it's going to be used properly, that's another big question, but at least the tools are there for sure. Then another news related to Russia is that Russia is definitely have some call it a Cold War or economic confrontation with Kazakhstan. We discussed about that Russia blocked transportation of the Kazakh crude oil to the world market, and now in sort of another sort of round of that, Russia blocked sale of sugar to Kazakhstan. So there are shortages. There are people sort of all of the hoarding going on, all of the things that are sort of related to shortages are happening in Kazakhstan. Obviously, some of the factories that were making candy stopped and things like that. At the same time, Russian president had a call with Kazakhstan president where they basically agreed to continue conversations. Basically said everything's wonderful, let's continue these conversations. Let's switch to Belarus, which is a country right north of Ukraine, and which is essentially a ally of Russia, and essentially it's a one country from all intents and purposes. So the major who was responsible for mobilization effort there was fired. So which again goes to what we mentioned before, is that Belarus military just simply does not want to fight, right? So even there is definitely huge pressure from Russia to use Belarus military in this war, because there is obviously shortages of Russian soldiers, at least for now. So there is an attempt to use Belarus, but at the same time it doesn't work because the desire is simply not there at the sort of grassroots level, and that's probably why this person was fired. And actually in related firing on firing topic, in Russia, the head of the military industrial complex of Russia was fired as well, and the person who is responsible for Russian military space program is about to be fired as well. So there is a very clear realization on the Russian top command and top political sort of leadership, is that the Russian military industrial complex is not delivering heavy weapons that are on par with what Ukraine receives from the West. And so that's just that realization is sinking in, and obviously they're, usually that's, these people were fired because they viewed as responsible for that failure. I think that's it with the general news. Now let's jump into the walks through the front line, starting from the very north, and then going down in a clockwise fashion. So the exchange of artillery fire remains sort of the same at the same level along this state border here. No new changes. It subsided a little bit, but still pretty active. Now let's jump to Kharkiv section of the front line. Situation here is the same, no changes, no differences. Some little pressure here, where the Russian troops trying to, kind of like improve their sort of launching pad or this buffer and get closer to Kharkiv, but they didn't have any major progress, and it's not any like large scale attack, it's pretty small scale action. Now let's move south to Izyum bridgehead. Things here also pretty stable, small scale Russian attacks. They're not really major, not what it used to be, but except, however, there was difference that they were sort of like in more places this time, sort of more like widespread. So as you can see, there were attacks towards this village Krasnopila, which we mentioned many million times, then village Dolina, which is here, and then in this area, sort of towards this village Ivanyivka here. So they were not successful, and they were more like a probing attacks, not just to create impression of the pressure on Ukrainian troops here. Now let's move to North Donbass section of the front line. Things here are also relatively quiet. The only place where the Russian troops tried to maintain attack was towards this Ivano-Darivka, this village here. It wasn't sort of intense or anything. It was just, again, to just keep the pressure there. Then if we look at the situation here, it's actually quiet in a sort of area straight east of Bakhmut. Then let's move to area west of Donetsk. There it's again small probing action towards Maryinka. Again, nothing really major there. Then let's jump to Zaporizhia front line. Things again stable here, no changes. Everything's kind of more or less the same. Then let's finally finish with the Kherson bridgehead. Things here are again stable, no changes. Everything, artillery fire, sometimes airstrikes. As we mentioned before, the large Russian ammunition depot was destroyed by Ukrainian side in this in Nova Kakhovka. Also, there are actually some interesting sort of perspectives from the Russian side about the life, or economic life on this occupied territories, and they're pretty. The picture is pretty ugly. There is essentially no economic life. People don't earn any money. There is no jobs, no salaries, no pension being paid, or no pay, not even like any kind of welfare, social payments, no nothing. It's like you're totally on your own to survive. And in many areas, there is not even electricity. There is scarcity of gasoline and diesel fuel, so it's pretty extremely rough life on this captured territories. And this is coming actually from the Russian side. This is not Ukrainian, which we would totally dismiss in this case, but this is perspective from the Russian side. Also, there is another. Actually, I forgot another topic about Ukrainian grain. So Ukraine started exporting its grain directly, actually, from Ukrainian territory. So there is two small ports on the Danube River here, and there are Ukrainian ports, and so there are first 8 bulkers left Ukraine with Ukrainian grain. So it looks like this bottleneck is slowly opening up. Remains to be seen if this is going to be long-term solution, but this could be a long-term sort of solution for now, to release as a release valve and allow Ukrainian economy to get some some money to support it. In related news about Ukrainian economy, it looks like Ukrainian sort of companies or Ukrainian government entities are starting negotiations with its lenders to essentially stop paying their on their debt. So specifically, the entity that we're discussing is Naftogaz of Ukraine, which is essentially government-created monopoly that distributes natural gas in Ukraine. This company has been sort of total cancer on Ukrainian economic life and creation of huge amount of corruption at the highest level of Ukrainian government. However, it was borrowing from on the West on the Western markets in US dollars, and now it's trying to negotiate delay or grace period on its on the coupon payments for its bonds for 2 years. So what this really means is it's in our view is restructuring, and it's kind of like default by different means. In based on what we're seeing with what's going on with Ukrainian economy, probably this sort of default is definitely looming and might be happening sooner than later. Probably as soon as sometime as September or October of this year, because the debt load on Ukrainian economy is extremely high, and given that at least 50% of the GDP is wiped out, there's simply no way to continue the heavy debt payments or interest payment, or repay the debt and interest payments, and given that a lot of resources are channeled towards the war. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.